The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty ground outside Kang Taeho's garage. He pushed open the heavy metal door and stepped into the cool air of Kepler 442b. The distant mountains glowed purple in the early light, their crystal formations catching the alien sunlight. Taeho had been living on this colony world for 15 years now. He fixed machines, repaired vehicles, and kept to himself. Most days were the same. Wake up, work on broken engines, eat alone, sleep. It was a simple life, the way he liked it. But this morning was different. A small white creature sat perfectly, still near his garage entrance. It was no bigger than a house cat, but its body was covered in scales that shimmered like pearls. The creature had 4 legs, a long tail, and what looked like tiny wings folded against its back. Its eyes were bright amber, and they watched Taeho with an intelligence that made him uncomfortable. "What are you supposed to be?" Taeho muttered in Korean, scratching his gray beard. He had seen many of the local animals since arriving on Kepler 442b. There were the 6-legged deer that grazed near the crystal caves. There were the flying fish that swam through the air during the rainy season. But he had never seen anything like this white creature. The creature did not move. It just sat there, watching him with those golden eyes. Taeho walked around it to enter his garage. The creature turned its head to follow his movement but stayed in place. Inside his workshop, Taeho tried to focus on his work. He had 3 hoverbikes to repair and a mining transport that kept losing power. But every time he looked up, he could see the white creature through his window. Around noon, Park Sora arrived with her official colony vehicle. She was the local administrator, a stern woman in her 30s who took her job very seriously. Her black hair was always pulled back in a tight bun, and she wore the standard blue uniform of the colonial authority. "Good morning, Taeho," she said, stepping out of her vehicle. "I need you to look at the power coupling on the main transport. It has been making strange noises." "Of course," Taeho replied, wiping grease from his hands. "Just park it over there." As Sora moved her vehicle, she noticed the white creature. It had not moved from its spot all morning. "What is that thing?" she asked, pointing at the creature. "I do not know," Taeho said. "It was here when I opened up this morning." Sora approached the creature carefully. She had studied xenobiology before taking her administrative position. This creature was unlike anything in the colony's database of local wildlife. "Have you tried to shoo it away?" she asked. "Not yet. It is not bothering anyone." Sora frowned. "Taeho, we have protocols about unknown species. This could be dangerous. It could carry diseases or be aggressive." The creature looked at both of them but showed no signs of aggression. Its amber eyes seemed almost sad. "It looks harmless enough," Taeho said. "That is not the point. I will need to report this to the research station." Taeho shrugged and went back to work on the transport. Sora took several pictures of the creature with her portable scanner, but the device could not identify the species. The creature remained motionless throughout the afternoon. When other colonists walked by, it watched them with interest but never moved from its position. Some people stopped to look at it, but most hurried past. Life on a frontier colony was busy, and strange animals were not uncommon. As evening approached, Taeho finished his work for the day. The white creature was still there, exactly where it had been that morning. He walked over to it slowly. "You lost, little one?" he asked in Korean. The creature tilted its head as if it understood his tone, if not his words. Up close, Taeho could see that its scales were not just white. They had a faint shimmer, like oil on water. The creature was beautiful in an otherworldly way. "You cannot stay here forever," Taeho said. "This is not a safe place for small animals." The creature made a soft sound, almost like a sigh. Then, it stood up on its 4 legs, stretched like a cat, and walked a few meters away. Taeho thought it was finally leaving, but the creature only moved to a different spot near the garage and sat down again. Taeho shook his head and went inside his small living quarters attached to the garage. He heated up a simple dinner and ate while reading technical manuals. Through his window, he could see the creature in the growing darkness. It had not moved from its new position. The next morning, Tai-Ho found the creature in exactly the same spot. It looked alert and healthy, as if it had slept well outdoors. When Tai-Ho opened his garage, the creature watched him with the same intense attention as the day before. "You are still here," Tai-Ho said, not really surprised. Throughout the second day, the pattern repeated. The creature watched people come and go. It observed Tai-Ho working on various machines. When Sora returned to check on her transport, she was not happy to see the creature still there. "I contacted Dr. Choi at the research station," she told Tai-Ho. "He wants to capture it for study." "Capture it?" Tai-Ho looked at the small creature. It seemed so peaceful and intelligent. The idea of putting it in a cage felt wrong. "It could be dangerous, Tai-Ho. We know nothing about it. It has been here for 2 days. If it wanted to hurt someone, it would have tried by now." Sora was not convinced, but she could not force Tai-Ho to do anything. The creature was on his property, and as long as it caused no trouble, there was no immediate legal reason to remove it. On the third morning, Tai-Ho woke to the sound of thunder. The weather on Kepler 442b could change quickly, and storm season was approaching. Dark clouds gathered over the mountains, and the air felt heavy with moisture. The white creature was still in its spot. But something was different. It seemed restless, turning its head toward the sky and making soft chirping sounds. Its scales caught the strange light that came before storms, making it glow faintly. Tai-Ho had lived alone for many years. After his wife Mi-young died in the transport accident, he had chosen solitude. He fixed machines because machines were predictable. They broke in logical ways and could be repaired with the right tools and knowledge. But this small creature had spent 3 days watching him work. It asked for nothing, demanded nothing, caused no trouble. It simply existed in his space with a patience that reminded him of something he had tried to forget. Mi-young had always brought home stray animals, dogs, cats, even injured birds. She would nurse them back to health and find them good homes. "Every living thing deserves kindness," she used to say. Tai-Ho looked at the white creature and felt something stir in his chest, a feeling he had buried with his wife's memory. The storm was coming closer. Soon it would be dangerous to be outside. The creature seemed to sense this too. It stood up and spread its small wings, testing them against the wind. Then it looked directly at Tai-Ho, as if making a decision. The creature turned and began walking toward the edge of the settlement, heading for the dangerous Crimson Canyon, where no sensible person would go during a storm. Tai-Ho watched it go and felt an unexpected pull in his heart. This small, mysterious being had chosen to trust him with its presence for 3 days. Now it was leaving, possibly to face the storm alone in the wilderness. For the first time in 5 years, Kang Tai-Ho made a decision based on feeling rather than logic. He grabbed his emergency survival kit and followed the white creature into the approaching storm. The first drops of rain hit Tai-Ho's face as he followed the white creature away from the safety of the colony. The small being moved with surprising speed across the rocky ground, its pearl-like scales catching flashes of lightning from the approaching storm. Tai-Ho had lived on Kepler 442b long enough to know that the electrical storms here were deadly. The planet's unique atmospheric conditions created lightning that could last for minutes at a time, turning the sky into a web of crackling energy. Most colonists stayed indoors during storm season, and no one with any sense wandered into the wilderness when the weather turned dangerous. But here he was, carrying his emergency pack and chasing a creature he barely understood toward the most dangerous part of the planet. The white creature moved ahead of him, like it knew exactly where it was going. It would pause occasionally, looking back to make sure Tai-Ho was still following, then continue on its path. The amber eyes that had watched him so patiently for 3 days now seemed urgent, almost pleading. "Where are you taking me, little one?" Tai-Ho called out over the growing wind. The creature made a soft chirping sound in response and kept moving. The landscape around them began to change. The flat ground near the colony gave way to rolling hills covered with the strange crystal formations that made Kepler 442b famous throughout human space. These crystals grew naturally from the planet's crust, creating forests of glittering towers that could reach hundreds of meters into the sky. During calm weather, the crystal forests were beautiful. Tourist ships from Earth would bring visitors just to see the way sunlight danced through the translucent structures. But during storms, the crystals became conductors for the planet's violent electrical discharges. Lightning would jump from crystal to crystal, creating a deadly light show that could kill anyone caught in the open. Thunder crashed overhead, and Tejo felt the first real stab of fear. What was he doing out here? He was a practical man, a mechanic who understood machines and logic. Following a mysterious animal into a storm was not logical. It was the kind of thing Mi Young would have done. The memory of his wife made him pause. Mi Young had always followed her heart, even when it led her into difficult situations. She had followed her heart when she married him, a gruff mechanic with no education and few social skills. She had followed her heart when she convinced him to leave Earth and start a new life on the frontier. And she had followed her heart on the day she died, rushing to help injured miners during a transport accident. Every living thing deserves kindness, her voice echoed in his memory. Sometimes kindness means taking risks. A brilliant flash of lightning lit up the sky, and Tejo saw something that made him forget all thoughts of turning back. The white creature was glowing. The pearl-like scales on its body had begun to emit a soft, steady light that pulsed in rhythm with the lightning strikes above. The glow was not reflected light from the storm. This was bioluminescence coming from within, the creature itself. As each bolt of lightning crashed through the crystal forest, the creature's scales brightened in response, as if it were somehow connected to the electrical energy in the air. Tai-Ho had studied basic xenobiology as part of his colonial training. He knew that some creatures on various worlds had evolved to use electricity for navigation or communication, but he had never seen anything like this. The patterns of light moving across the creature's scales were complex, almost like a language. The creature stopped at the edge of a deep ravine that cut through the crystal forest. This was the beginning of Crimson Canyon, a massive geological feature that stretched for hundreds of kilometers across the planet's surface. The canyon got its name from the red crystal formations that lined its walls, creating a landscape that looked like the inside of a giant geode. During the day, Crimson Canyon was dangerous enough. The paths were narrow and unstable, and the crystal formations could collapse without warning. During a storm, it became a death trap. Lightning would bounce back and forth between the canyon walls, creating electrical currents that could travel through the ground itself. The white creature looked down into the canyon, then back at Tejo. Its amber eyes held an expression he had never seen before. There was intelligence there and something else. Desperation. "You want me to follow you down there?" Tejo asked, even though he knew the creature could not understand his words. The creature made a sound that was part chirp, part whistle. Then it spread its small wings and glided down to a narrow ledge about 10 meters below the rim of the canyon. Tejo looked at his emergency pack. He had rope, climbing gear, and a portable shelter. He had food and water for 3 days. He even had a medical kit and emergency beacon. But none of that would help him if he got trapped in an electrical storm inside a crystal canyon. Another flash of lightning illuminated the scene below. The white creature sat on the ledge, its scales pulsing. With that strange bioluminescent rhythm, it was waiting for him to make a choice. Tejo thought about his life on Kepler 442b. For 5 years, he had lived in routine and solitude. He fixed machines, earned money, and went to sleep each night in an empty bed. It was safe. It was predictable. It was slowly killing his soul. This creature had sat outside his garage for 3 days. It had not begged for food or demanded attention. It had simply existed in his space with a patience that spoke of intelligence and purpose. Now it was asking him to trust it, to follow it into danger for reasons he could not understand. The rain was falling harder now, and the lightning strikes were getting closer together. Soon the storm would reach its full intensity, and travel would become impossible. Tejo made his decision. He secured his climbing rope to one of the larger crystal formations and began rappelling down the canyon wall. The white creature watched him descend, its scales pulsing brighter as he got closer. When his feet touched the ledge, The creature made a pleased sound and nuzzled against his leg. "I hope you know what you are doing, little one," Tejo said, reaching down to gently touch the creature's glowing scales. They felt warm, almost electric against his fingertips. The creature looked deeper into the canyon, where red crystals created a maze of passages and chambers. Lightning flashed again, and for a moment, Tejo thought he saw something else glowing in the depths. Something much larger than his small companion. The white creature began moving along the ledge, leading him deeper into the canyon. It's bioluminescent. Scales provided enough light to see by, creating an ethereal glow that reflected off the crystalline walls around them. The patterns of light seemed to grow more complex as they moved, as if the creature were communicating with something in the darkness ahead. Thunder crashed overhead, echoing through the canyon like the voice of an angry god. The storm was reaching its peak, and they were now committed to whatever path the creature was leading him down. Tejo followed the glowing being deeper into Crimson Canyon, leaving behind the safety and predictability of his old life. For the first time since Mi-young's death, he felt truly alive. He was scared, yes, but he was also filled with a sense of purpose he had not experienced in years. The white creature chirped softly and continued deeper into the mysterious depths of the canyon, its scales pulsing with secrets that Tejo was only beginning to understand. Behind them, the storm raged on, but ahead lay something that would change not just Tejo's life, but the future of human civilization among the stars. The choice had been made. There was no turning back now. The deeper they went into Crimson Canyon, the more amazing the white creature's glow became. Its pearl-colored scales now pulsed with waves of soft blue and green light that seemed to dance across its small body. The patterns were not random. They moved in sequences that repeated every few seconds, like a code or message being sent over and over again. Tejo followed the creature along narrow ledges that wound between towering crystal formations. The red crystals of the canyon walls caught and reflected the creature's bioluminescent display, creating a light show that was both beautiful and otherworldly. Above them, lightning continued to crash through the storm clouds, but here in the protected depths of the canyon, they were safe from the worst of the electrical discharge. After nearly an hour of careful climbing, the white creature stopped at what looked like a dead end. A massive wall of crystal blocked their path, its surface smooth and unbroken. But as Tejo approached, he realized this was not a natural formation. The crystal wall was perfectly geometric, with smooth edges and precise angles that could only have been created by intelligent design. Strange symbols were carved into its surface, glowing faintly with the same blue-green light that emanated from his small companion. "What is this place?" Tejo whispered, running his hand along the carved symbols. The crystal felt warm to the touch, and he could sense a faint vibration coming from somewhere deep within the structure. The white creature approached the wall and began to sing. The sound that came from the small being was unlike anything Tejo had ever heard. It was part melody, part harmonic resonance, and part something else entirely. The notes seemed to bypass his ears and speak directly to something deep in his mind. The song was hauntingly beautiful, filled with longing and ancient wisdom. The creature sang. The symbols on the crystal wall began to glow brighter. The entire structure started to vibrate, and a low humming sound filled the air. Then, without warning, the wall split open like a flower blooming, revealing a passage that led deeper into the crystal formation. The white creature looked back at Tejo with its amber eyes, then walked confidently into the passage. After a moment of hesitation, Tejo followed. The passage led to a vast chamber carved entirely from crystal. The ceiling rose high above them, disappearing into darkness. But what captured Tejo's attention was the center of the chamber, where a massive crystalline structure rose from the floor like a technological tree. The structure was clearly artificial, but it seemed to be part organic and part machine. Veins of glowing material ran through its translucent surface, pulsing with the same rhythm as the creature's scales. Smaller crystal formations surrounded the central structure, each one humming with barely contained energy. As they entered the chamber, the white creature's song grew louder and more complex. In response, the massive crystal structure began to project images into the air above them. Teho gasped as three-dimensional star maps appeared in the space over his head. He recognized some of the constellations from his colonial navigation training, but others were completely foreign. The maps showed the movement of celestial bodies across vast distances and time periods, with one particular object highlighted in pulsing red light. The red object was moving through space toward their solar system, and according to the projection, it would arrive very soon. Dr. Choi needs to see this, Teho said to himself, pulling out his emergency communicator. But the device showed no signal. The crystal formations were blocking all radio transmissions. The white creature continued its complex song, and the projections changed. Now the images showed what appeared to be a massive vessel moving through space. It was unlike any human ship Teho had ever seen. The vessel seemed to be alive, with organic curves and what looked like wings spread wide across several kilometers of space. But there was something wrong with the ship in the projection. Parts of it appeared damaged and sections were dark where they should have been glowing. This was not the arrival of conquerors. This was the approach of refugees. The creature's song reached a crescendo, and suddenly the projections showed images that made Teho's heart race. Beings that looked like larger versions of his small companion appeared in the holographic display. They had the same pearl-like scales, the same intelligent eyes, and the same graceful movements. But these creatures were massive, some as large as the transport vehicles back at the colony. The images showed the history of these beings. Teho watched as their beautiful world was destroyed by some cosmic catastrophe. He saw great ships launching into space, carrying survivors away from their dying home. He saw centuries of travel through the void between stars, searching for a new place to live. And he saw the small creature beside him in a new light. This was not just an animal that had wandered into his life. This was a scout, sent ahead to evaluate whether the humans of Kepler 442b could be trusted. The projection changed again, showing a countdown sequence in mathematical symbols that Teho could understand despite their alien origin. Whatever was coming would arrive in less than 3 days. The white creature finished its song and looked up at Teho with eyes that seemed ancient despite its small size. For the first time, Teho truly understood what he was looking at. This creature was intelligent, possibly more intelligent than humans. It had been testing him, evaluating his character through 3 days of patient observation. "You have been watching us," Teho said softly, "deciding if we can be trusted." The creature made a soft sound that somehow conveyed agreement. Then it approached one of the smaller crystal structures and placed its front paws against its surface. The crystal responded by projecting new images. These projections showed the colony where Teho lived, but they were not current images. They were recordings that had been made over the past several months. The creature's people had been watching the human settlement, studying their behavior and culture. Teho saw images of colonists helping each other during emergencies, sharing resources during difficult times, and working together to build their community. He also saw darker moments, arguments, selfishness, and the occasional violence that occurred when people were under stress. But overall, the recordings showed humans at their best. They showed a species that cared for each other, that helped those in need, and that could work together toward common goals. The creature had been sent to make a final evaluation. Its 3 days outside Teho's garage had been the last test. How would a human react to a small, vulnerable creature that needed help? Would they show kindness or fear? Compassion or aggression? Teho had passed the test. His decision to follow the creature into danger had convinced its people that humans could be trusted. But now came the hard part. The creature's people were arriving soon, and the human colony would need to be prepared for first contact with an alien species. Some humans would welcome the newcomers. Others would fear them and possibly react with violence. The white creature began walking toward another passage at the far end of the chamber. As they moved, the crystal projections faded, but the low humming sound continued. The ancient structure was still active, still sending and receiving signals across the vast distances of space. Teho followed his small companion deeper into the crystal complex, knowing that his life and the life of everyone on Kepler 442b was about to change forever. The storm above was ending, but a much larger storm was approaching from the stars. The white creature looked back at him one more time, its scales pulsing with patterns that somehow conveyed urgency and hope in equal measure. They had work to do and very little time to do it. The real test was just beginning. Getting back to the colony took most of the morning. The storm had passed, leaving the crystal formations sparkling in the sunlight like a field of diamonds. Taeho's emergency beacon finally worked once they climbed out of Crimson Canyon, and, within an hour, a rescue transport arrived with Park Sora and Dr. Choi Hyunwoo from the research station. Dr. Choi was a thin man in his 40s who studied alien life forms. He had thick glasses and always carried a portable scanner that could analyze almost anything. When he saw the white creature calmly sitting next to Taeho, his eyes went wide with excitement. "Incredible," Dr. Choi whispered, slowly approaching the creature. "The bone structure suggests a reptilian base, but the scale composition is unlike anything in our database. And these bioluminescent capabilities." The white creature watched the scientist with interest but showed no fear. When Dr. Choi held out his scanner, the creature actually moved closer, as if it wanted to be examined. "It is intelligent," Taeho said. "More intelligent than we first thought." "How can you be sure?" Sora asked. She had been worried sick when Taeho disappeared during the storm, and now she was trying to balance relief with anger. "Because it showed me something in the canyon, something that changes everything." Back at the research station, Taeho told them about the crystal chamber and the projections he had seen. Dr. Choi listened with growing amazement, while Sora looked increasingly concerned about the security implications. "You are saying this creature's people are coming here?" Sora asked. "How many of them?" "I do not know exactly. The ship in the projection was very large." Dr. Choi was examining the white creature, who seemed to enjoy the attention. The scientist's scanner was recording detailed information about the creature's biology and the patterns of light that continued to pulse across its scales. "These bioluminescent displays are definitely a form of communication," Dr. Choi said. "The patterns are too complex to be random, but without understanding the language structure, we cannot interpret what it is trying to say." Taeho had an idea. He pulled out a piece of paper and drew simple mathematical equations. 2 + 2 = 4. The square root of 9 = 3. Basic concepts that any intelligent species should understand. The white creature watched him draw, then approached the paper. Using one of its small claws, it carefully traced the numbers, then added its own equation. The symbols were different, but the mathematical relationship was clear. "It understands mathematics," Dr. Choi said excitedly. "This is how we start building a common language." Over the next several hours, they worked together to establish basic communication. The creature, which Taeho had started calling Beck because of its white coloring, proved to be remarkably patient and intelligent. It could understand complex mathematical concepts and seemed eager to learn about human language and culture. By evening, they had made significant progress. Beck had learned to recognize several dozen human words and had taught them some basic concepts in its own visual language. The creature's scales could display different colors and patterns to represent different ideas. Blue flowing patterns meant water. Red pulsing lights meant danger. Green spirals meant growth or life. But their work was interrupted when Commander Yoon Jae-min arrived at the research station with a squad of colonial security forces. Commander Yoon was a career military officer who had served in the Outer Rim conflicts before taking his position on Kepler 442b. He was a tall, serious man who always wore his uniform perfectly pressed and his hair cut regulation short. He did not like surprises, and he especially did not like potential threats to colonial security. "Dr. Choi," the commander said as he entered the laboratory, "I received your report about possible alien contact. I need to understand exactly what we are dealing with." Sora had called in the military as soon as she learned about the approaching alien ship. It was standard protocol for any potential first contact situation. Dr. Choi explained what they had learned about Bayek and its people. The commander listened carefully, but his expression grew more concerned with each detail. So you are telling me that unknown aliens have been watching our colony for months, and now a large ship is approaching our system? Commander Yoon said. That sounds like a reconnaissance mission followed by invasion. No, Taeho interrupted. The projections showed refugees, not conquerors. Their world was destroyed. They are looking for a new home. That is your interpretation, the commander replied coldly. But we cannot take that risk. I am implementing Security Protocol 7. All non-essential personnel will be moved to secure locations, and our defense systems will be prepared for possible hostile contact. Baek seemed to sense the tension in the room. The creature's scales shifted to red and orange patterns that Dr. Choi had learned meant distress or warning. Commander, please reconsider, Dr. Choi said. If we prepare for war, we might create the very conflict we are trying to prevent. This creature has shown nothing but peaceful intentions. One small creature does not represent an entire species, Commander Yoon replied. Until we know more about their capabilities and intentions, we must assume the worst. The argument continued for another hour, but the commander would not change his mind. Colonial defense was his responsibility, and he would not take chances with human lives. That night, Taeho sat in his quarters at the research station with Baek sleeping peacefully beside him. The creature had grown comfortable with human presence and seemed to trust Taeho completely. Its scales glowed softly in the darkness, pulsing with the slow rhythm of deep sleep. Dr. Choi knocked on the door and entered quietly. I have been thinking about our communication problem, he said. We need to learn more about their culture and intentions before the ship arrives. But our mathematical approach is too limited. What do you suggest? Taeho asked. I think Baek needs to take us back to that crystal chamber. If we can access their historical records and communication systems, we might be able to establish real dialogue with the approaching ship. Taeho looked down at the sleeping creature. That means going back into Crimson Canyon. The commander will not approve. Then we do not tell the commander, Dr. Choi said quietly. This is too important. For military protocols, we have a chance to make peaceful first contact with an alien species. We cannot let fear and suspicion ruin that opportunity. Baek stirred in its sleep, its scales briefly flashing with blue and green patterns that somehow conveyed hope and determination. Even in sleep, the creature seemed to understand the importance of what was happening. When do we leave? Taeho asked. Early morning, before the security patrols begin. Just the three of us. The next morning, they slipped away from the research station before dawn. Baek led them back to Crimson Canyon with eager energy, its scales glowing brighter as they approached the hidden entrance to the crystal chamber. But when they arrived at the ancient structure, they found that it had changed. The crystalline formations were more active than before, humming with increased energy. New projections filled the air above the central structure, showing detailed star charts and what appeared to be technical specifications for the approaching ship. Baek approached the control crystals and began singing its complex song. In response, the chamber filled with new images and sounds. For the first time, they heard voices speaking in the creature's musical language. Dr. Choi worked frantically to record everything while Taeho tried to understand the rapidly changing projections. One thing became clear very quickly. The approaching ship was much larger than they had first thought, and it carried many thousands of beings like Baek. But it also carried something else. The technical displays showed damage to the ship's propulsion systems and life support. These refugees were not just seeking a new home. They were desperate survivors whose ship was failing after centuries in space. Time was running out for both species. The approaching ship needed help that only the human colony could provide. But if Commander Yoon's defensive preparations created a hostile first contact, thousands of innocent beings would die in the darkness between the stars. Baek looked up at Taeho with its ancient amber eyes, and somehow he understood what the creature was asking. It needed his help to save both their peoples. The real work was just beginning. The alien ship arrived exactly when the crystal chamber had predicted it would. It appeared in the outer system just after sunset on the third day, a massive organic vessel that looked more grown than built. Through the colony's telescopes, it resembled an enormous creature swimming through the darkness of space its bioluminescent sections pulsing with the same patterns they had learned to recognize from Bayek. Commander Yoon immediately activated all defensive systems. Colonial Guard fighters launched from the small military base, and the settlement's shield generators powered up to maximum capacity. Emergency broadcasts ordered all civilians to remain in their homes, while the military prepared for possible invasion. But Taeho, Dr. Choi, and Beck were still in the crystal chamber deep in Crimson Canyon, working desperately to establish communication with the approaching ship. "The biosignatures are incredible," Dr. Choi said, studying the data streaming from the crystalline communication array. "There are at least 50,000 life forms on that ship, maybe more. But the vessel itself is dying. Their life support systems are failing." Beck had been singing almost continuously for hours, its scales blazing with complex patterns of light as it communicated with its people. The small creature looked exhausted, but it would not stop. The conversation it was having through the crystal network was clearly urgent. Through their developing communication system, Taeho had learned more about Bayek's people. They called themselves the Yongsin, which meant something like dragon spirits in their musical language. They had been traveling through space for 300 years, searching for a world where they could rebuild their civilization. Most of the other worlds they had found were already occupied by species that attacked them on sight. A few had tried to communicate, but fear and misunderstanding had led to conflict each time. The Yongsin had learned to be very careful about first contact. That was why they had sent Bayek ahead as a scout. The young Yongsin had spent months observing the human colony, learning about their behavior and culture. Beck's 3-day vigil outside Taeho's garage had been a final test to see how humans would react to a small, vulnerable alien. "We have to get back to the colony," Taeho said. "Commander Yoon needs to know what we have learned." But when they emerged from Crimson Canyon, they found the settlement in complete lockdown. Security checkpoints blocked all roads, and armed guards were stationed at every important building. The 3 of them were immediately arrested and brought before Commander Yoon for questioning. "You deliberately disobeyed orders and compromised colonial security," the commander said angrily. "While you were playing with your pet alien, I have been preparing to defend this colony from invasion." "There is no invasion," Dr. Choi protested. "These are refugees. Their ship is damaged and failing. They need our help." "So they claim. But how do we know this is not a trick? How do we know they are not lying about their intentions?" Beck, who had been silent during the argument, suddenly began to glow brighter than Taeho had ever seen. The creature's scales blazed with urgent patterns of red and gold light. It was clearly agitated about something. "What is it trying to say?" Commander Yoon asked, despite his suspicion. Dr. Choi checked his scanner. "The patterns indicate extreme distress. Something is wrong with the ship." Through the chamber's communication link, they had learned that the Yongsin ship was not just damaged. It was actively dying. The biomechanical systems that kept it alive had been slowly failing for decades. The Yongsin had perhaps days before their vessel could no longer support life. But there was something else. The ship's arrival had been detected by other species in nearby star systems, hostile alien civilizations that the Yongsin had encountered before were now moving toward Kepler 442b, drawn by the energy signatures of the dying ship. "Commander," Taeho said urgently, "we need to help them. If their ship dies out there, it will attract scavengers and raiders. Our system will become a battleground." Commander Yoon was torn between duty and humanity. His job was to protect the colony, but the situation was becoming more complex than simple invasion or defense. The deadlock was broken when Park Sora burst into the command center with an emergency communication from Earth. "Commander, I just received priority orders from Colonial Command. We are to provide all possible assistance to the alien refugees. Diplomatic teams are already en route from Earth, but they will not arrive for weeks. We are authorized to take whatever action we think best." The message changed everything. Earth's government had been monitoring the situation through long-range sensors and had decided that peaceful first contact was worth the risk. But even with official authorization, the problem remained the same. How could they help the Yongsin without creating panic among the colonists? And how could they trust beings they barely understood? Teho looked down at Beck, who was still glowing with urgent patterns. The small creature had trusted him enough to lead him into danger. It had shared its people's history and desperate situation. Now it was asking for something much more difficult. "I will go to their ship," Teho said quietly. "What?" "Commander." Yoon stared at him in shock. "Someone needs to make direct contact. Someone needs to meet with their leaders face to face. I volunteer." "That is completely insane," the commander replied. "We have no idea if their ship is safe for humans. We do not know if they can be trusted." "Beck trusted me," Teho said simply. "For 3 days, a small, vulnerable creature put its life in my hands. Now I am putting my life in theirs." Dr. Choi stepped forward. "I will go with him. This is the most important xenobiological discovery in human history. I cannot miss the opportunity to learn about their culture." Commander Yoon was outnumbered and running out of options. The alien ship was dying, hostile forces were approaching, and Earth wanted peaceful contact. Sometimes military leaders had to make decisions based on trust rather than strategy. "If you are going to do this," the commander said finally, "you will take every precaution. Full environmental suits, emergency beacons, and armed escort ships." But Beck had other ideas. The small creature approached Commander Yoon directly and began displaying a complex series of light patterns. Through their communication system, Dr. Choi translated the message. "Beck says that showing up in military vessels with weapons and armor will be seen as hostile. The Yongsan elders are very old and very cautious. They have been attacked too many times by species who appeared peaceful at first." "Then how do we make contact?" the commander asked. Beck's answer was simple but terrifying. Tae-ho would go alone, with only basic life support and Bayek as his guide. No weapons, no armor, no military escort. Just one human showing the same trust that the young Yongsin had shown 3 days earlier. "The Yongsin respect courage and sacrifice," Dr. Choi translated. "They will judge humans based on how much risk we are willing to take for peaceful contact." Commander Yoon was not happy with the plan, but he recognized that sometimes diplomacy required taking risks that military strategy would never recommend. 6 hours later, Tae-ho found himself in a small shuttle approaching the massive alien vessel. Beck sat beside him in a specially designed life support chamber. Its scales pulsing with what he had learned were patterns of excitement and anticipation. As they got closer to the ship, Tae-ho could see that it was even more magnificent than the projections had suggested. The vessel was several kilometers long, with flowing organic curves that seemed to shift and change as he watched. Bioluminescent patterns moved across its surface like slow lightning, and he could see smaller Yongsan flying around the ship's exterior on their own wings. An opening appeared in the ship's side, and Tae-ho piloted his shuttle into what appeared to be a docking bay filled with breathable atmosphere. As he stepped out of his shuttle, he saw dozens of adult Yongsan waiting to greet him. They were magnificent creatures, ranging in size from beings as large as horses to ancient elders who were easily the size of old Earth elephants. Their scales came in every color imaginable, and their wings spread wide in what he hoped was a gesture of welcome rather than threat. But what impressed Tae-ho most was their eyes. Like Beck, they all had the same intelligent, ancient gaze that spoke of wisdom and sadness earned through centuries of hardship. The largest of the creatures, an ancient female whose scales were the color of starlight, approached him slowly. When she spoke, her voice was like music mixed with the sound of wind through crystal formations. Beck translated, its own scales glowing with patterns that Dr. Choi had taught Tae-ho to recognize. She says, "Welcome, Tae-ho of the humans." She says that Beck has told them of your kindness to a lost child. She says they are honored to meet a species that shows compassion to strangers. Tae-ho bowed respectfully, the way he had seen people greet elders in his grandmother's village back on Earth. "Tell her that we are honored to meet the Yongsin. Tell her that we want to help." The elder's response came through Beck's translation, and it changed everything Tae-ho thought he knew about courage and sacrifice. She says that helping the Yongsin will put humans in great danger. Other species will come here seeking to destroy our ship and anyone who helps us. She asks if humans are prepared for such a test. Tae-ho thought about his answer carefully. He thought about Commander Yoon's defenses, about the colonists huddled in their homes, about the approaching hostile forces that would arrive soon. Then he thought about Bayek sitting patiently outside his garage for 3 days, trusting him to make the right choice. Tell her that humans are not perfect. Tell her that we make mistakes and we are often afraid. But tell her that we do not abandon friends in need. If the Yongsin will have us as allies, we will stand with them against whatever comes. The ancient elders' scales shimmered with patterns that needed no translation. They spoke of gratitude, hope, and the beginning of something that would change both species forever. The real test was just beginning, but they would face it together. 6 months after first contact, the world had changed in ways that no one could have imagined. The Yongsin ship had been saved through a combination of human engineering and ancient dragon biotechnology. What had started as an emergency rescue had become the foundation for the most successful interspecies cooperation in galactic history. Tai-Ho stood in his expanded workshop, watching Bayek work alongside him on a new project. The young Yongsin had grown significantly in the past months, now standing nearly waist-high to Tai-Ho and sporting beautiful pearl-white adult scales that shimmered with rainbow patterns when the light hit them just right. "Hand me the bio-neural interface," Tai-Ho said in Korean, then repeated it in the musical language of the Yongsin that he was slowly learning to speak. Beck chirped with amusement and passed him the requested component with one graceful claw. The device was a perfect fusion of human electronics and Yongsin biotechnology, something that would have been impossible without their partnership. They were working on a new type of communication system that would allow instant translation between the two species. Similar projects were happening all over the colony as humans, and Yongsin learned to combine their different strengths and knowledge. Outside the workshop, Tai-Ho could see the new reality of life on Kepler 442b. Yongsin flew overhead on their powerful wings, carrying cargo and passengers between the human settlement and the temporary dragon enclave they had built in the crystal formations of Crimson Canyon. Human children played in the streets with young Yongsin, their laughter mixing with the musical sounds of dragon communication. The integration had not been without problems. Some humans had been afraid of the large alien creatures, and some Yongsin had struggled to trust a species they barely understood. But Park Sora, now serving as the director of interspecies relations, had worked tirelessly to smooth over conflicts and build understanding between the two communities. Dr. Choi had become something of a celebrity throughout human space. His research on Yongsin biology and culture was revolutionizing xenobiological science. But he spent most of his time in the field, working directly with Yongsin scientists to unlock the secrets of their biotechnology. Even Commander Yoon had come around to supporting the alliance. When hostile alien raiders had arrived 3 months after first contact, looking to loot the dying Yongsin ship, they had found instead a well-defended system protected by both human military technology and Yongsin combat wings. The raiders had retreated quickly, spreading word throughout the galaxy that this system was under the protection of a powerful alliance. "The biomatrix is stabilizing," Beck said in its musical voice, patterns of green and blue light flowing across its scales to emphasize the words. Tai-Ho smiled and checked their work. The communication device was nearly complete, and it represented everything good about the human-Yongsin partnership. Human engineering precision combined with Yongsin biological innovation to create something neither species could have built alone. "Excellent work, partner," Tai-Ho said, using the Yongsin word that meant both friend and family member. The door to the workshop opened, and Park So-ra entered with an official-looking document in her hand. Her expression was excited but also slightly overwhelmed. "Tai-Ho Baek, I have news from Earth," she said. "The Galactic Council has formally recognized the Kepler 442b alliance as a sovereign interspecies government. We are the first human-alien partnership to receive full diplomatic status." Beck's scales erupted in patterns of gold and silver light that Tai-Ho had learned meant celebration and joy. The young Yongsin had grown into an important cultural bridge between the two species, translating not just words but concepts and emotions. "There is more," Sora continued. We have received requests from 17 different human colonies asking for help in establishing their own Yongsin refugee populations, and 3 other alien species have asked to send diplomatic missions to study our integration methods. Taeho sat down heavily on his work stool. When he had followed a small white creature into a storm 6 months ago, he had been thinking only of showing kindness to a lost animal. He had never imagined that his simple decision would lead to changing the course of galactic civilization. The Yongsin elders want to speak with you, Sora said. They have a proposal that could affect the entire galaxy. An hour later, Taeho and Beck stood in the great council chamber that had been built in the heart of Crimson Canyon. The chamber was a marvel of combined technology, with crystalline Yongsin biostructures seamlessly integrated with human architectural elements. Holographic displays showed star maps and colony reports from across human space. Elder Sulgi, the ancient female who had first welcomed Taeho to the Yongsin ship, floated in the center of the chamber. Her massive form was supported by the same biogravitational technology that powered their ships. Around her, other Yongsin elders and human leaders sat in a perfect circle that symbolized their equal partnership. Taeho of the humans, elder, Sulgi sang in her voice like crystal wind chimes. You have given us something we had not felt in 3 centuries, hope for the future. Dr. Choi, now serving as the official xenolinguistic translator, rendered her words into Korean. But Taeho was beginning to understand the musical language well enough to catch the emotional undertones that could not be fully translated. We have learned much from your people, the elder continued. Not just about technology or science, but about the courage to trust strangers, about the wisdom of showing kindness to those who are different. Beck moved closer to Taeho, its scales pulsing with soft patterns of affection and pride. In the months since their first meeting, the young Yongsin had become much more than a translator or cultural guide. It had become family. There are other species in the galaxy who are like us, Elder Sulgi said. Refugees and wanderers who have been searching for homes and acceptance. Species who have been rejected by others because they are different or because they are misunderstood. The holographic displays changed to show star charts marking the locations of various alien civilizations. Some were marked in red, indicating hostile or aggressive species. Others were marked in blue, showing peaceful but isolated communities. A few were marked in yellow, indicating species that were refugees or nomads, like the Yongsin. We propose to create a new alliance, the elder sang, not just between humans and Yongsin, but between all species who believe in cooperation and mutual aid. We propose to build a network of worlds where beings can find safety and acceptance regardless of their origin or appearance. Commander Yoon leaned forward in his chair. That is an admirable goal, Elder Sulgi, but it would also make us a target for every aggressive species in the galaxy. They would see our alliance as a threat to their expansion. Yes, the elder agreed. It would be dangerous. It would require great courage and sacrifice from all who joined us. But the alternative is to continue living in isolation and fear, watching as innocent species are destroyed or enslaved by those who choose conquest over cooperation. The chamber fell silent as everyone considered the magnitude of what was being proposed. They were talking about reshaping galactic politics, creating something that had never existed before in known space. What would you need from us? Park Sora asked. Elder Solji's scales shimmered with patterns that conveyed both hope and uncertainty. We would need human courage. We would need your willingness to take risks for strangers, as Taeho took risks for Beck. Most species in the galaxy choose safety over compassion. Humans seem to be different. Taeho felt all eyes in the chamber turn toward him. Somehow, without ever intending it, he had become a symbol of human character to an entire alien civilization. I am just a mechanic, he said quietly. I am not a diplomat or a leader. I just tried to help a small creature that seemed lost. Exactly, Elder Sulgi sang, her voice filled with what sounded like ancient wisdom. You did not help Beck because of politics or strategy. You helped because it was the right thing to do. That is what makes humans different. That is what gives us hope. Beck moved to stand directly beside Taeho, its scales glowing with patterns of loyalty and determination. The young Yongxin had learned human body language well enough to place one clawed hand gently on Taeho's shoulder. "The first test mission is already being planned," Dr. Choi said, consulting his datapad. "We have identified a refugee fleet of crystalline beings called the Seongsu, who have been fleeing persecution for decades. They are currently hiding in an asteroid field 2 systems away, but their ships are failing and they are running out of resources." Commander Yoon studied the tactical displays that had appeared in the holographic projections. "It would be a dangerous rescue mission. The asteroid field is claimed by the Korthak Empire, and they do not welcome intruders." "The Korthak are slavers and raiders," Elder Sulgi said, her musical voice taking on harmonics that conveyed disgust. "They have destroyed 3 species in the past century and enslaved 2 others. If we do nothing, the Seongsu will die or be captured." Taeho looked around the chamber at the faces of humans and Yongxin, who had become his friends and colleagues. 6 months ago, he had lived alone with his memories and his machines. Now he was part of something larger, something that could make a real difference in the galaxy. "When do we leave?" he asked. The rescue mission launched 2 weeks later. A combined fleet of human ships and Yongxin biovessels traveled to the Hroxan asteroid field where the Seongsu refugees were hiding. Taeho flew in a specially modified shuttle with Bayek as his co-pilot, leading a team of engineers and medical specialists. What they found was heartbreaking. The Seongsu were beings made of living crystal, beautiful creatures who communicated through light and harmonic resonance. But their ships were ancient and failing, and many of their people were dying from energy starvation. The rescue took 3 days of dangerous work in the unstable asteroid field. Human engineering teams worked alongside Yongxin biotechnicians to repair the Seongsu ships and transfer the refugees to safety. When Korthak patrol ships arrived to investigate the activity, they found a well-coordinated alliance fleet ready to defend the innocent. The Korthak chose discretion over valor and withdrew without a fight. 3 months later, the Seongsu had established a new colony in the outer planets of the Kepler 442b system. Their crystalline architecture created stunning cities that glowed with inner light, adding new beauty to the growing alliance. Word of the successful rescue spread throughout the galaxy. More refugee species began sending secret messages asking for help. More human colonies volunteered to join the alliance. Even some previously neutral alien civilizations expressed interest in the cooperative model that was being developed. But the most significant development came from an unexpected source. Taeho was working in his shop one evening when Bayek suddenly stopped what it was doing and began singing a complex song that seemed to resonate with frequencies beyond normal hearing. Outside, other Yongxin throughout the settlement took up the song, creating a harmony that made the crystal formations ring like bells. "What is happening?" Taeho asked, but Beck was too focused on the song to translate. The answer came from Dr. Choi, who burst into the workshop with his scanner readings showing unprecedented energy signatures. "Taeho, you need to see this," he said excitedly. "We are receiving a signal from deep space. It is not from any known species, but it is using the same harmonic frequencies as Yongxin communication." The signal turned out to be from a previously unknown civilization called the Eternal Wanderers. They were an ancient species that had been traveling between galaxies for millions of years, exploring and studying other forms of life. They had been monitoring the development of the Kepler 442b alliance with great interest. Their message was simple but profound. In all their travels across multiple galaxies, they had rarely seen species choose cooperation over conquest. The alliance between humans, Yongxin, and Seongsu represented something unique in their vast experience. They wanted to share their knowledge. 1 year after first contact, Taeho stood on the observation deck of the new alliance headquarters, watching ships from dozens of species come and go from the busy spaceport below. The small white creature that had sat outside his garage had grown into a magnificent adult Yongxin, who now served as the alliance's chief cultural liaison. "Do you ever regret following me that day?" Beck asked in perfect Korean, its scales shimmering with patterns of affection and curiosity. Taeho smiled and placed his hand on his partner's shoulder. "Never. You gave me a purpose I never knew I was looking for. Through the viewport, they could see new construction projects throughout the system. Refugee settlements, research stations, and defensive platforms all working together to create something that had never existed before in galactic history. A true alliance based on mutual respect and the belief that every species deserved a chance at peace and prosperity. The Eternal Wanderers want to establish a permanent embassy here, Beck continued. They say our alliance model could be adapted for other galaxies. They want to help us spread these ideas across the universe. Tejo watched a group of young beings from different species playing together in the station's central plaza. Human, children, Yongxin hatchlings, and young Seongsu sparkled together in the artificial sunlight, their different forms of communication blending into a harmony that spoke of hope for the future. Mi Young was right, he said quietly, thinking of his wife's words from so long ago. Every living thing deserves kindness. Beck's scales glowed with warm patterns of understanding. And sometimes, the Yongxin said, small acts of kindness can change the entire universe. Outside their window, another ship was arriving. It carried refugees from a species they had never encountered before, beings who had traveled across the galaxy after hearing rumors of a place where different civilizations lived together in peace. Tejo and Beck exchanged a knowing look and headed for the docking bay. There was work to do. The small white creature that had once sat patiently outside a mechanic's garage had indeed changed the universe. But the real change had come from something even simpler than alien contact or advanced technology. It had come from the basic human decision to show kindness to a stranger. And that, more than any weapon or starship, was what made humanity special among the stars.